This is a presentation of Northeast Streaming Sports.
Good evening, everybody. Keith Engel for TGI Sports Talk College Football Huddle. Got a little new music to open the show. I got something I like better. I'm just deciding if I want to pay the money for the for the rights to play it. We don't want Facebook shutting us down. Gosh, I got so much music I could play. Anyway, guys, we got a lot to talk about tonight. We've got we're gonna have Mark Mancini from Mancini Media on for a 45-minute talk or so, and we got a lot to talk about. You want last week in college football, we wanted upsets, we got upsets. You want near upsets, we got near upsets. We got coaches getting fired. We've got more news on realignment. We've got all kinds of movement up and down the coaches poll. Just so much going on. I love this time of year in college football. Now that we're getting real games starting, and the polls will start to mean something, and these games all mean something. You know, real quick, and we'll talk to Mark about this some too. You know, people talk about the expanding the playoff and it's going to dilute the regular season. I so disagree. It's going to make every game more important than it is today, in my mind, because you'll have it open to more leagues and more teams. So we'll dive into that. Real quick, before I bring Mark on, I want to let you know that Friday, a late edition, and I'm really happy that this happened. I've got Skip Hall. Skip is a former head coach at Boise State back in the 90s. He worked under the legendary Don James at Washington. He coached with Nick Saban at Kent State. He coached some great players in Warren Moon, Jack Lambert, just to mention a couple. He's got a new book coming out called Coach 'em Up, the Skip Hall story, and the forward is by the aforementioned Nick Saban. So Skip will be on the show Friday. Friday, 8 a.m. Eastern time, and we're really looking forward to it. And we may talk to Skip now and then as the season goes on, as the season goes on. Hello, Rick Sherlock. Good evening instead of good morning. Without further ado, because we've got a lot to talk about, and we've only got Mark for, actually longer than we normally have him on a Sunday morning, but let's bring in Mark Mancini from Mancini Media and see what he's got to say tonight. Hello, Mark.
Always a pleasure to be on the show that's sweeping the country, my friend.
Gosh, it's great to have you here. Listen, before we start, I got to share something hilarious with you. Remember we had a little audio problem Sunday morning? I couldn't hear you?
Yeah.
Well, my headset was unplugged just this much from my soundboard, and I didn't know it until this afternoon.
Technology's amazing. It happens, you know.
God, I don't wear you don't see that pen and pencil protector in my pocket here, so I was not in the AV club.
No.
Rick Sherlock, one of my old high school classmates. Well, not my classmates. He's a little ahead of me, but he remembers the AV club, I'm sure. How are you tonight, Mark Mancini? What are you thinking?
I'm doing really good. Patty Blylevin says hi to you.
Oh, hi, Patty.
Yeah, Patty will, her show coming up a little later on. And boy, you're talking about Skip Hall. He's a great guy, man. Really a good man.
I'm really excited about it.
Boy, the network you've built up, man, I'll tell you, it's second to none. You've got a great network, and I'm just so blessed to be a part of it on Sundays and jumping in on Wednesdays.
I'm happy to have you. You have been a great addition to my shows when you're able to make it, and I do appreciate that. And guesting on some of the shows you produce. Yeah. And trying to keep my head from spinning around and falling off on Thursday nights.
Yeah,
I'm looking forward to tomorrow. My wife actually thought they were in Alcatraz, and I don't want to. Or maybe she meant.
Sometimes I don't know if they're flying over, they're climbing it, or they're underneath it.
Well, it's a lot of fun, I'll tell you that for sure. Listen, Mark, let's jump into some college football. I mean, last weekend. Gosh, so much going on. Oregon coming to the horseshoe and beating Ohio State. Ohio State was ranked, I think, third, and I think they fell all the way down. I got a note here somewhere. I mean, they fell from third, I think, to 11.
Yeah.
Is that right? In the coaches poll. Notre Dame almost gets knocked off. Iowa not really an upset, I guess, if depending on how you want to look at it. They were at Iowa State, but they've dominated that series over the last several years. But I really thought Iowa State was a good play Sunday, actually. But USC getting blown up by Stanford, and we've seen the repercussions with Clay Helton getting fired. What's your big takeaway from last weekend, Mark, before we kind of jump into
Well, I'll tell you one thing. Clay Helton's a nice guy, but there's an old saying, nice guys finish last.
Yeah.
And USC has a traditional great football program over the years. We saw with the guys that have come out of there. I can go back to O.J. Simpson. And then, you saw with Reggie Bush and Matt Leinart and having that nice little run. But I think USC has been a victim of themselves in more ways than one. We saw, Kiffin fired on a tarmac in Arizona, and then you had a chance to do something, and with Ed Orgeron there, and he was resurrecting the program, passing out cookies and everything, and I loved him dearly. And they said, no, we don't need you. So he took his act to LSU. And then when you looked at Sarkisian, and they've had their chances to really get some guys here, I think USC has been a little bit of penny pinching in my book. And it's my opinion. Yeah. I'll throw it out there. If you've got a rich tradition of football, you got to open up your wallet. I think they want to be able to control a coach there. And that's why they get these middle of the pack type of coaches instead of a Bob Stoops, instead of an Urban Meyer, instead of a Nick Saban. Maybe not if they're not going to come there unless they're given the keys to the city and then some. But you got to pay to play. And it's funny when I heard their athletic director talking about, we're into winning championships and competing. What have you done for me lately? That's the first thing that comes to my mind. And the Pac-12 has been something out of a Clint Eastwood, the good, bad, and the ugly of late.
Well, I've always thought USC was one of the top 5 jobs in the country. And it's amazing. I think I read a stat somewhere the last couple of days that it's been over 40 years. In the last 40 years, only Pete Carroll has come there and left of his own volition because of the success that he had. And it's hard for me to believe with the recruiting base they have in Southern California and whatnot, that this team is not relevant year after year and can't, as you said, can't bring the big name candidates in there to coach. And maybe it is the penny pitching. I think it's got a lot to do with the ADs that they've had. They want to bring USC type people in, although it wasn't Pete Carroll had a lot of success. He wasn't a USC guy, but Hayden wanted USC guys. Lynn Swan wanted USC guys. I'll bring it up. I wasn't going to go this till later, but since we're on the topic of Clay Helton, there's all kinds of names getting thrown around, obviously. Marco Cristobal's already denied it. James Franklin's denied it. Urban Meyer actually had to deny it because he had a bit of a meltdown in Jacksonville this past week, and people are wondering if he'll make it through the season here. But, I mean, what do you see? Do you think that they will open up the pocketbook for some of these guys?
Well, I'll tell you, I always say this, and it's been going on since I've, pretty much was able to work. Your company is only as good as the people you hire. And if the top is screwed up to a certain extent, then it doesn't matter what you have on the bottom. You can hold your tradition on anything you want and say USC football is this and that. But when I look at USC football for this and that, their quarterbacks, haven't really lasted in the NFL as far as when you go back to Mark Sanchez that took the Jets to the AFC Championship twice. I don't know what happened to him. I don't know what happened to John Booty there and, Matt Barkley and, the list goes on and on. Other than Carson Palmer, okay. They got great, defensive guys that come out of there and last in the NFL. But I think you need a coach that's going to garner the respect. And right now, the guy that comes to my mind would be Stoops. Stoops would be the guy. But you got to pay these kind of guys. These kind of guys, they want control. They want complete control of the organization. And if you want your program turned around like UCLA turned it around with Chip Kelly, it took a little bit, but they brought in the guy. They got rid of these Bob Toledos and Carl Durrell types, Tom Donahue, the conservative types, and they finally given it to a guy like Chip Kelly, and I like it. Same thing in Arizona State, Herm Edwards.
Yeah. You bring up Bob Stoops, and it's an interesting point. I don't know why Bob Stoops has not come back. He retired at a fairly early age. I think his father passed away, if I remember the story right, not long before he decided to what looked like a sabbatical from Oklahoma, but now it's starting to look like a retirement full time. I thought he'd be back in 2-3 years, and I know he's had offers thrown at him from the NFL and from college. Is this a job that can get him back, you think?
Well, there's a lot of talent at USC. Last year, they had probably the best receivers in the country. And if you can't do nothing with this team, and all I kept hearing is, they're this and that. They opened the season by, getting past a couple of the Arizona schools there, and everybody was talking about stuff. And then what happened in the Pac-12 championship? Oregon ran them over, and that was the end of that song and dance. So I just don't know, but I will tell you this. Stanford came in there Saturday and just took them apart, top to bottom. I know the score indicated it much more closer, but if Stanford had their first string in there, they would have railroaded them even more. Who knows? They probably would have put 60 up. Shaw it seemed like stole the playbook from Clay Helton.
Yeah, Rick brings up, I think he means Eric Bieniemy from Kansas City.
Yeah, that's sure. A great guy. Yeah.
He's a good offensive mind. He doesn't have ties to the school, which we've talked about before, but all the regular. We just talked about, all the regular names are coming out, Franklin and Cristobali and obviously we talked about Stoops. We talked about, who do we talk about?
Franklin was up there.
Franklin's up there. Matt Campbell's name's going to come up, obviously, as he always does. There's a couple guys. There's the coach from BYU, and I'm trying to think of his name now.
Oh, yeah,
I'd be shocked if his name doesn't come up in this conversation. And also Clemson's offensive coordinator, who's been very picky. He's been offered a bunch of jobs, but he may come up in this conversation as well. I got the names here, and now I finally found where I had them. So the coach from BYU is Kalani Sitake.
I like the name, right? I got to know, Bieniemy when he, I covered San Diego State in the heyday, and I'll tell you one thing, Bieniemy, man, I'll tell you, he has done wonders with the Chiefs there. I'm surprised he hasn't got the opportunity in the NFL. Yeah. He's got a bright head on his shoulders there. He would be a tremendous fit at USC. But what I see with the athletic director over here, not too much experience. He needs to step back, let the guy run the program, run the strengths, stop meddling into it, concentrate on the gymnastics and, the underwater basket weaving at USC and let the coaches coach.
Yeah, I agree. You know who I would have thought, I really thought would be a great fit, and it's not going to happen, I don't think, because of them moving to the Big 12 in a couple of years, is Luke Fickell at Cincinnati. I think he'd be a great fit, but I don't know that he's going to be looking to leave Cincinnati now going into a Power 5 conference.
No, and another good one too, but he's not going to leave. I don't want to see him leave Pitt, is Narduzzi.
Yeah.
Narduzzi's another good coach. That's the thing. They're going to bring in their, the USC, I think, is, what ends up happening in college football to a certain extent. And I throw this out there and people go, hey, come on, cut some slack on it. But, when I look at the hype trains and whether it's Notre Dame or Ohio State or USC, I think these schools have lived off tradition for quite a while. And we saw last year talking about Ohio State, in other avenues of bringing them up, they should have never been in the championship game last year because it should have been Texas A&M or, Coastal Carolina. One of those teams should have been in there, but Ohio State travels well. They got a great name. So, the college football committee figured they'd be the top 4.
You know what I always worry about in a situation like USC here, you fire a coach after 2 games or midseason, you name an interim, and if the interim comes in there, and I'm pretty sure this is how Clay Helton got the job in the first place. The interim comes in, he performs, above expectations, and it doesn't have to be a national championship, and you're almost kind of stuck with the guy a little bit. It didn't happen with Ed Orgeron, obviously, but often it happens, and it's not the right choice, but the school kind of gets backed in a corner.
Well, and not only that, when you look at the choices they had before Helton, Sarkisian's now at Texas, Orgeron's at LSU.
Yeah.
Look at Kiffin. I mean, you had opportunities, and I can't help but think, in switching gears, and I know it's a college football show. It's almost like the New York Knicks when you had Pat Riley and all these great coaches there, and you couldn't win, and then they go somewhere and they end up winning. That's the same thing with Orgeron. He won at LSU, and Sarkisian's going to plant his thing there. Great offensive coordinator in Alabama, and somebody else's junk. It could be somebody else's treasure. And Nick Saban found that out. But USC is always, until they figure it out, they're gonna pick these middle of the pack type of coaches that they can kind of control, and they're not going to pay the big money to bring in a big name. And look at across the city here, Chip Kelly, is at UCLA, and look at Chip Kelly.
I was just going to mention that their hand might get forced a little bit. If Chip Kelly I think UCLA, I've said it a bunch of times, I think they're going to win that South. I think they're going to beat Oregon in the championship game, and they might even sneak into the playoff. Pac-12's with Ohio State losing, and we'll kind of start to switch gears here a little bit. With Ohio State losing, it opens the door for the Pac-12 to get in this playoff for the first time in quite some time. And Chip Kelly and Marco Cristobal, I think, are the two guys best positioned to do it. I know you love Herm Edwards there in the South as well.
Edwards had Shaw's got a, what they did to USC. I mean, Tremaine was just unbelievable. And, but you look at Stanford's schedule, they got to, they get UCLA, they get Oregon. They got a tough road to handle it. But, Shaw's a good coach. He's been a real good coach. So you got them. It's going to be really interesting to see where this lands. But USC, I think, is going to be looking up. When you bring in an interim coach, all you can do is circle the wagons on this, Keith, and lay the chips lie where they may. But I think during the offseason, Mike Bowen's got to realize that, in order to compete with these other schools, we got to bring a big-time guy in here.
Well, let's talk about a couple of these games from last weekend. I mean, Ohio State just lays a complete egg. They were beaten up and down the field. I mean, Marco Cristobal likes to pound the football, and he doesn't apologize for the way he plays football at Oregon. And they may not love it, but all the time, but they like to win. And he pounded the ball. They rushed the ball. I mean, can they survive with the defensive coordinator? Kerry Combs is the defensive coordinator there. And I feel like they got to make a change because they were in the same play 5 times for touchdowns, it feels like, Saturday. And Ohio State's defense has been a mess. Even though they played really well last year, their defense has been a mess for a while. This isn't something new. Are they going to rebound?
I'll tell you one thing. They always hang their hat on that they can beat Michigan. And when you look at, Urban Meyer, when he was there, and he had that, team up to respectability in more ways than one. When I look at this team now, and even in the last year, I mean, I know they came in there with Justin Fields and, the whole thing, and played on a bum ankle and all that. But I've really never looked at Ohio State as, a team that, are they on the same platform as an Alabama or something? Because, growing up, you'd always see Ohio State come out here to the West Coast, the big champion back there, and come out here and get rolled by a USC or get rolled by a Washington or something. And, it was okay beating up on the Purdues and the Northwesterns and all these other ones. But, then the hype train would come out here in January and just roll over. And, it's changed over the years. But, when I look at those guys, I just, I don't know. I don't know, are they a top school? And, growing up, it was always the Florida schools in the top 10, the Florida States, the Floridas, the University of Miami's. And, now we've seen the Alabamas and the Clemsons and the SEC dominate. And, I think, the way this thing is going, it's going to be in that conference, probably Ohio State and Michigan, and maybe, whoever else tries to make a move, Penn State. There's a lot of teams in that conference over there that remind me of a Bruce Springsteen song, 3 steps forward, 8 steps back.
I'll tell you, team to watch out for is Iowa. I mean, they've got a vertical. One thing they've missed a lot in a lot of years during the Kirk Ferentz era, and he's a great coach. He's had great consistent teams. Never quite, got obviously over the hump. I think the one year they made the playoff, they got blown out, maybe by Alabama. But now they've got a bit of a vertical passing game, which adds another layer to this team. And Ohio State better watch out in conference from getting beat by them. And plus Penn State looks like they may be back. We'll find out more about them this weekend. They've got a big game with Auburn at home.
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting game. We'll find out where we lie with Penn State, and that's an interesting thing. And I'll tell you, when you break down these teams and these conferences and everything, and boy, I'll tell you that Iowa program was set. When I remember growing up with Hayden Fry running the reins.
Great coach. Yeah. Great coach. The team that really gets left behind in this whole thing, we just talked about Luke Fickell at Cincinnati. They start the year at number 8. That's why I hate preseason polls. They start the year at number 8, and all these teams behind them. And I understand Oregon went to Ohio State. That's a big game. It's bigger than any games. Cincinnati's won huge 2 weeks in a row, not against great competition, but they're still stuck at number 8, while Oregon, Iowa's blown past them, and they don't get the respect. And I don't know if it's the league. I said to you Sunday, and I think Carlos, who's not here tonight, but he always misunderstands. He thinks I love the ACC. I love the AAC.
Right.
By the way, is in a boatload of trouble now because of the big news over the weekend after we talked, I think, or we didn't get a chance maybe to talk too much about it Sunday. The AAC has lost 3 of their best teams to the Big 12 now, and in Cincinnati, Houston, and UCF.
I think BYU's going too.
And BYU is the 4th team. And the Big 12 says they're not done yet. I mean, what's going to happen? Are we going to end up with just 5 conferences? And where's this all going to end, Mark? Where do you see it ending?
Well, I see everybody chasing the SEC. That's where I see everybody. I mean, they were the first one to bring in the Texas and Oklahoma's in there. And then, the Pac-12 kind of, were shaking in their boots and saying to the ACC and everybody that, hey, let's try to compete with these guys. The big problem I have with college football, and a perfect indication is this week. How fun was it to see an Oregon and Ohio State game? With Oregon going in there and beating them at the shoe. And now this week, people are shelling out big money in Corvallis or Eugene, wherever, to see Oregon smash Stony Brook. This is the big problem I've always had with college football, even growing up. I can remember the Nebraskas with Jarvis Redwine running and all those guys, and Tom Osborne racking up wins on Pacific. I've always said this, and I'll stick by this. If you want to be a top 10 school, you need to play a top 10 schedule. And if you want to keep the rivalries, then the top 2 teams in these conferences, or top 4, maybe we'll play outside that conference, like a North and a South, or, go into the ACC if you're Pac-12 or whatever. And then the bottom feeders can play each other out. Because I don't think it's fair for some of these schools to rack up some wins on bottom feeders, and then the panel will sit back and say, well, they're not going to drop a notch. Case in point, the Cincinnati team. They're a good football team.
Very good.
And we saw that with Coastal Carolina.
Yeah. Agreed. And, I'll tell you, one of the things that, and this team gets lost a lot, even though they had some great success a couple of years ago. We talked I was talking to Larry Sorensen, who's the Wake Forest color analyst, a former major league pitcher for the Brewers. He's actually the football analyst there. And he comes on the show some Wednesdays. And we talked about this last week. Seeing Milton come back and play for Florida State a couple weeks ago was awesome. He had great success at UCF when before Scott Frost left for Nebraska. I think this UCF team is really on the cusp of becoming a power in NCAA football in general, because they put so much money into that program and facilities, training facilities, a new stadium. Gus Malzahn is there now as the coach, and I think he's a great fit there. He just wasn't a great fit at Auburn, and I think that's a team to watch out for here in the coming years, especially in a Power 5 conference.
Well, that's the good, and the definitely bad is what the hell is going on with the Washington Huskies.
Maybe the Pac-10 will drop them and pick up some of these AAC teams.
Unbelievable how that program is just kind of falling off by the wayside.
It's really sad. And, it's funny. Skip Hall, obviously, who we talked about at the top here, I'll have on Friday. And he coached under the great Don James there. They had some great football teams back in those days.
Oh, they were tough. And it just seems like the football program's kind of fallen off in the Pacific. Somebody might need to send an SOS.
Oh, gosh. Well, I think, like I said, Chip Kelly's ready to kind of push the needle now, and I think the West is going to get back in the conversation. And we'll see. Stanford could have turned a corner, with a quarterback change. And again, that's a great coach, so you can't count them out of their loss was to not a great Kansas State team, but it's out of conference. So does it hurt?
I'm getting excited. My Pitt Panthers, they could be 6-0 by the time ACC play comes around. Nice
win at Rocky Top last week for sure.
First time in 38 years.
What else stands out? Toledo just kind of shocked me. I don't think Notre Dame's liable to fall out of the top 25 for the year's over. They got some really tough games coming up.
Well, the other thing that stuck out is, and I know, Arizona State, clubbing UNLV there, but that was one that really stood out. But Appalachian State, man, you got to be careful when you put these guys on your schedule.
Well, it's funny. My wife
is knocking off Michigan again.
my wife has made me a big Miami Hurricane fan because her son did his undergrad work there, and she became a fan to stay close to her son while he was in Miami, and she's in here in upstate New York. And I told her, do not, she goes, we can't lose Appalachian State. I'm going to stop watching. I said, don't sell this team short. That's a good football team. And, talking about realignment, Mark, before we move on to maybe some of this week's games, if it's not done yet, I mean, the AAC now has got to go raid some other conference. This is what happened in 2012, right? It's a tumbling effect, a snowball effect. And, the AAC is going to go to the Sun Belt and maybe grab an Appalachian State or Louisiana, and it's going to the weaker get weaker, while the stronger get stronger. And then the middle ground's got to keep, chipping away until we got nothing except these 5 conferences. I mean,
well, you know what it reminds me of, Keith? It reminds me of you're at the beach and you say, you see a bunch of guys sitting around. You say, hey, let's go play some football. And you start picking and choosing and divvying up the sides. Someone gets stuck with the guy that's about 5'4" there on his team that he really didn't need. And that's what's going to happen with this thing. It's almost like a draft. And, we'll pick this school. Nobody wants that one. Okay, I'll take this one. You can have that one. It goes back and forth here.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you one thing. I think the NCAA is pretty much on its way out, if they're not already out.
Well, they're already talking about a total realignment of how they run the whole organization and how college sports are overseen. I don't know what their plan's going to be. I mean, the NCAA is a messed up organization, but if they're going to give a lot of control back to the conferences, I don't know how smart that is either, because then you're just going to have the Wild West. So I don't know what the answer is, but there needs to be a better governing body and a process than they have today.
Well, not only that, when you saw years back with Texas and Notre Dame kind of getting their own TV contracts and everything, I think the writing was on the wall. Then you had the whole Ed O'Bannon thing and trying to take him to court with the players thing and everything. So I think that was pretty much the beginning of the end of the NCAA. And now they're almost like sitting on an island waiting for somebody to rescue them.
Yeah, it's scary, and they've got to do something here. I mean, there's so much stuff going on, right? I mean, right now everything's so in flux with the realignment and the shuffling of teams, which isn't stopped. It's not going to stop, and it's not going to be 2025. And when these teams move, it's going to be probably in a year or two.
Yeah.
Then you got the playoff expansion, which I'm excited about, but I was much more excited about it when we had real regional conferences and they all got a chance to participate in a playoff. I'm not excited about seeing a 12-team playoff where 10 of them come from, 4 conferences. I'm not excited to see.
Well, I totally missed the Thanksgiving games in the Oklahoma and Nebraska, which we'll see.
Good point.
Yeah, and then I missed the Penn State games. I mean, they had them, a few of them the last couple of years, but still, I missed those things. that was a yearly thing. So, that's if they've kept the USC's, the UCLA's, and all these other ones, I just find it hard to believe why we couldn't keep the Oklahoma, Nebraskas at least, and the Pitt Penn States.
Well, what's funny, you bring up Oklahoma, Nebraska. They're actually playing this weekend. So it is in September, and we get a game we used to see traditionally the day after Thanksgiving. We talked about, and usually it would, more often than not, I should say, it would decide who was going to win the Big Eight at that point in time. And now Nebraska's fallen on such hard times. I mean, they're excited when they get a 25-point win over Buffalo at home. And Stafford is in trouble there.
And that's the old thing. You never want to see the rivalries go out. The Red River rivalry, the Civil War rivalry. I mean, the Apples one. There's so many rivalries, and you just hope down the line that doesn't. If teams are moving all over the place here, we don't lose some of them key rivalries that we grew up with. Tradition.
Yeah. I put up the banner here because you brought it up, and we're talking about games coming up anyway. So Oklahoma's Nebraska. Will it ever be the same? Can it ever be the same with Nebraska in the Big Ten and Oklahoma in the Big 12? Or I'm sorry, the SEC soon. And they can't even play every year.
When you look at those rivalries, you go back to, like I was alluding to, Jarvis Redwine. You had Brian Bosworth. Yeah. I mean, it was just unbelievable. Head coaches matching, heads there, and that's a tough one to really lose. And it's going to be fun. I'm going to keep an eye on it this weekend, definitely.
It's going to be a lot of fun. Let's look at some of the other games coming up this weekend. There aren't a ton of big games, at least in the top 25, but there's a couple.
I think Auburn's going to beat Penn State.
At Penn State, really. That's
I think Auburn can.
You got a bold prediction, so I'll give you one too. I think Florida is going to beat Alabama this weekend.
Wow. I'll tell you one thing, and I always tell people this: Nick Saban is the bar of coaches in college football. The quarterbacks that have been turned out over there, the McCarrons, and then you look at the Tuas, and then the Mac Jones, and now this Bryce Young. I mean, they just are so prepared to play in the pros. It's almost unheard of. And then the guys that come out of there, I mean, the Devontae Smiths, it just goes on and on.
Yeah, it does. And we talked about so the big games this weekend are Alabama, Florida. I would say Penn State and Auburn. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, your favorite.
Well, it's not Pitt and Western Michigan.
You got Arizona State and BYU, which I think is a great matchup.
That's a good one.
It's going to kind of define one of those teams' season, perhaps. Get them either rolling in the right direction or not. I like that matchup.
Arizona State, if you looked at them last year, they kind of came up short in a couple games. They blew their opener to USC. I don't know how they did that. Sitting there watching it, they had that game won and they gave it to USC. But I think they've bought into Herm Edwards over there, and I like Daniel, the quarterback. And I mean, when you look at Arizona State, they're about a year out of really doing some damage across the board, I think. I really think they're about a year out. They're buying in, and you're right. This is a game that could define them.
Yeah, it's a game that I like. I talked about my Miami team. They got another tough opponent. Michigan State's they're not the little sisters of the poor coming in there Miami this week either. That's a good matchup. And Cincinnati, who we just talked about, going to last year's surprise team, Indiana. So there's not a lot of as many marquee games as we've seen here the last couple of weeks, maybe, but I like these games a lot. The exciting game you want to look at this week, if you like points, Tulane and Ole Miss. The over and that's got to be about 85.
There's a lady we talked to, and she's a great lady over there, Edie Van Pelt. If you ever want to get her, the Rebel Walk, keep your eye. Ole Miss is something, man. Ole Miss is. They're building something there. Keep your eyes on that program.
They hold anybody under 25. They're going to have a chance to win every game. Rick brings up Georgia, South Carolina, which is it's a decent rivalry game. I don't think South Carolina's got enough.
Yeah, as much as I like to see the Gamecocks do something, I think that the Bulldogs just got too much firepower there.
Now, Rick, I will tell you, I know I shot you down a little bit last week when you were excited about Georgia scored some points finally and getting a touchdown. And I said they got to play somebody good. If they score 35 or 40 points this week and win by, I'll give you credit that Georgia's offense is better than I think it is. So,
well, the problem with Georgia, Keith, and I've never really taken this school seriously for quite a few years, and they really haven't been that relevant force since Vince Dooley.
Yeah.
Buck Bellew, Herschel Walker. I know they've got into, the SEC championships, but they found ways to lose them and blow them. So, I mean, and then they started out this year real good with Clemson, but it's a school that I got to see more of them. The ingredients are there and it looks good and everything. It's missing something.
Well, it always felt, and Kirby Smart's a great coach, and he learned under one of the best, obviously, in Nick Saban. But so did his predecessor there. It's starting to feel, and Rick, please speak up if you want. It's starting to feel like the Mark Richt era as well. Mark Richt was a really good coach, but he just could not get over the hump at Georgia like he couldn't at Miami. And he learned under one of the best as well in Bobby Bowden. So it's starting to feel that way. They need to really kind of put it together and win a national championship. And this, or Kirby Smart's going to start looking like Mark Richt. So,
yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. And if Georgia does something and goes to the championship again and lays an egg, it's, what have you done for me lately?
Yeah. And I really don't mean to disparage Mark Richt. I think he's a really good football coach. I just think it's tough. It's so tough down there. The competition in the SEC is so tough.
Oh, yeah.
And especially when Nick Saban's your main competitor until he retires.
Well, not only that, you might figure out a way to beat him, and then he'll pay you back down the line in more ways.
That's a good point. That's a great point. I gotta find a new banner here. I don't like this banner. We'll take it down. Let's put up Mark Mancini's information. I got so much going on now. I got too many banners. I can't find my way to what I want. Gosh, where's Mark Mancini? Oh, man. When you're old like me, you got to have these things in front of you, and I just need somebody to work my board for you. I'm going to have to hire somebody to work the board.
You do a great job, man. Move over, pardon the interruption. I love these banner things you come up with.
Listen, so what else you like? You know what else? Another game I like this weekend outside of the top 25. It's going to be interesting. We already talked about USC. They're going to Washington State, a team that's not really at the crest of their success. But it's, kind of a big game for USC, and maybe it's a good place for their interim coach to get started is a little visit to.
Well, this could be working in USC's favor. You circle the wagons. It's a new beginning. A couple games into the season. Let's get away from the hostile environment at Tinseltown. We can settle up here. The weather's a little cooler in Washington. And, Spokane. And so who knows? Or the other way is let's mail a season in, and we'll wait for a new coach to take over our program. I mean, there's two ways to do it. Either you circle the wagons and move forward, or you start to feel sorry for yourself and get Kleenex from the local supermarket.
Yeah, I really see, circling back, I guess, to where we started, I really think they got to go all in, and they got to get the best coach they can find, and not just, again, Scarsazian was not, he wasn't.
A guy I really would really turn their program around, and he, he's under contract and stuff, I believe, is Jack Del Rio. Jack Del Rio would be a good coach for USC.
I believe he's the defensive coordinator for the Washington, I think. Yeah. Well, you know what? And he's is he a USC grad?
Yeah, I think USC guy.
I think he is too. Yeah, that's an interesting thought too. I'm going after, I said Luke Fickell probably might be out of their range now because I think he's going to want to stay at Cincinnati and play in a big conference. We'll see. Money's going to talk. But I'd like to see them go after a Fickell. James Franklin's name always comes up, but what's James Franklin really ever? I mean, he's a nice coach. Right. Don't get me wrong, but it's not like he's, the second coming of John McKay. I don't get the infatuation with him.
That's the big thing. If you're gonna get one of your own, Jack Del Rio, If you're not, and you're going to try to, bring in a big payoff, I like the Stoops. You're not going to get the Sabins. You're not going to get the Dabo Sweeneys. These guys they're going to command big money, and but they'll turn your program around, guaranteed.
Look at it.
How much are you willing to pay to compete? That's what it's going to come down. And I look at USC, and I just think it's an organization that wants to be able to control their coaches, and they're not going to pay big money. They're going to get a middle of the pack coach, and that's probably why they Sarkisian and Orgeron and all those guys decided to move on.
I got a feeling you might see them really go after Bob Stoops. I do. Yeah, I really do. If Bob Stoops is going to come back, now's the time. I mean, this is the place. I don't know what if he does come back now, I don't think he comes back. It's kind of like a Bill Cowher situation with Pittsburgh, right?
Well, the other thing too is if let's say a couple other guys and you're like, it's not going to happen, but if you're looking at guys in your own conference there, the Shaws or the Herm Edwards, they turn your program around real quick too.
Yeah, they would. They don't feel like the right fit though for USC to me. I mean, maybe Marco up there in Oregon, but I don't see them going in the conference for anybody. I just don't see them fitting. I can't see Shaw fitting on that USC, that Los Angeles scene. He doesn't seem to fit that. I see him going
McDaniels.
You know what? They could do worse. They again, he's not the head coach, but they went with an expatriate coach at one point, and they had pretty good success. So might be an idea. Give us a couple last thoughts before you got to leave here today for us, Mark. I know you picked. So I'm going to call that your upset pick, is your Auburn over Penn State.
Yeah, I like that one.
Florida State over.
As much as I like South Carolina over Georgia, I don't think it's going to happen. But it could be one of those things like we do on the Sunday show. What could be a surprise? So I'll probably throw the South Carolina up there.
Okay, that's a good one. Give me a dead solid lock.
Wow, the dead solid lock.
Can't possibly lose. It's a little leisure.
I would have to say, with everything that's transpired and everything, I think USC goes up and beats Washington State. I think that'd be a lock.
That's a good call. And I'm going to take Clemson over Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech's terrible.
The Yellow Jackets.
Clemson's got to win games by about 50 from here on out to get back in the playoff conversation. So that's going to be my pick. What else you want to leave us with, Mark? Give us a little rundown of what's going on in your world before you're gone. And I know you're starting pretty soon in Philadelphia.
Yeah, 2 weeks from tomorrow, we start on WWDB AM 860 out of Philadelphia. So we'll be on the air 6 o'clock to 7 o'clock in Philly, 3 to 4 out here in Los Angeles and across the board. So we're so blessed on that. Still doing the Pittsburgh Pirate podcast. Last so many weeks of doing that. We're down to the last 19 games. We'll do that again Friday from Miami, where the Pirates will play the Marlins. And just blessed doing these shows. And man, I love the thing on Sunday with you. You're in a great network, TGI Sports, and being a part of this on Wednesdays.
Well, the pay's probably not as good as the gig in Philadelphia, but
no.
You'll get a nice gift.
I always say it like this. Money comes and goes. Relationships are priceless, and you surround yourself with good people and push them to the center of attention. Good things start to happen, and I'm blessed.
So Rick wants to bet us a cheesesteak. George is going to win. Yes.
I'll bet you cheesesteak. I'll take the Carolina Gamecocks.
There's your wager, Rick. Well, we'll have to fly Mark in, Rick, when we have our next little happy hour here at BJ's Brew House.
I'll have to mention Rick on the Philly. We got to get you on there, Keith, too, man.
Anytime. I'd love to come on.
And I know tomorrow night we see you on Left Turn at Alcatraz.
Yeah,
Make
fortunately,
sure
you don't have to see me. I want to see that. We got to get that show on video. I'd like to see what's going on behind the scenes there.
I don't know what it would look like if we got that show on video.
we might shut all of Facebook down. I don't know.
Exactly.
All right, Mark. I know you got to run. Listen, thanks for coming on tonight. We'll talk to you later, buddy.
I love you dearly, man. The show that's sweeping the country, second to none. Your boys.
Excellent. Thanks for being here. Tell Patty I said hi.
I will. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye. Thanks to Mark Mancini Media. We'll continue, guys. We're not done. We're going to talk a little bit about some other stuff. I want to look at the whole slate of games. Let's go back to last week a little bit. I want to circle back, because we were jumping around the Ohio State-Oregon game, guys. Ohio State's in trouble. As we talked about, the defense is just horrendous. And I don't see it getting better unless they make a move with the defensive coordinator there myself. Alabama obviously won big last week. Georgia wins big. Rick Sherlock pointed out to me last Sunday, 56-7 over UAB. Again, I made a remark, I know, that day that, you got to play somebody good. UAB's not had a horrendous team the last few years. They play I think they play in the Sun Belt. Where do they play? Let's see. I don't know why that's, I should know this. I look at these damn things enough. I should know this. Where do they play? Well, maybe it's the Metro. Where are they playing these days? Help me out, Rick. You watched the game last week. Well, I can't find them. Isn't that awful? I really thought they were playing in the Sun Belt, but that's not where they're playing. Interesting. Conference USA, that's where they're playing. There's some good teams in that Conference USA. Charlotte with a nice win to open their season, so not terrible. Let's run down this top 25 again. I want to talk a little bit about the eight. This is last week's top 25, obviously. Oklahoma 76-0 over Western Carolina. Rick talked about these teams playing these games. Everybody wants these games. Don't feel bad for Western Carolina, though. The Western Carolina, he talked about Stony Brook this week is going to get Ohio State. They're going to get $1 million payday. That's what they're there for. They know they're going to get their butts kicked, and that's what it's for. Conference USA. Thank you, Rick. Damn. I got to do something because I've had trouble with my glasses lately, and I just got brand new glasses, and I'm having all kinds of trouble with the computer lately. So enough about my problems. Texas A&M squeaker over Colorado. Texas A&M's got a really good team, brand new quarterback, but they've struggled. Their first game wasn't awful, but to go out to Colorado, it's not a great team. They got to. Jumbo Fisher's got to get these teams. Jimbo Fisher's got to get this team rolling, and the quarterback play has been a little spotty so far. Clemson killed South Carolina State, as I mentioned. They got to win games by 50. Cincinnati with a great win over Murray State. They played not great competition the first couple games, but they've blown them out, and they're stuck at 8. Watch 3 teams go by them already. It's a problem with the polls. Notre Dame probably should have lost the game. Toledo gave them all they could handle. How good Toledo is, I'm not sure yet. We'll have to see. There's been some good teams that come out of that conference over the last several years as well, in Buffalo. And who else has come out of there and played well from time to time? Ball State last year had a good team. So, the Mid-American is not a terrible conference, but Notre Dame can't be losing or almost losing at home to Toledo. That's just not going to cut it if you want to be relevant as far as the playoff hunt matters. And that's all matters to Notre Dame. A team like Notre Dame. That's what matters to the Clemsons and the Alabamas. Coastal Carolina, UCF for now, Liberty, and these teams can compete and have really good and play for a New Year's Day bowl game, or a really good bowl game. And that's a victory. That's a good season for them. Not at these other schools, though, guys. It's just not. Iowa play a great game at Iowa State and beats Iowa State. Brock Purdy gets benched in this game. He's coming back to start this week, but 3 interceptions. Just, Brock Purdy is a veteran quarterback, and Iowa State needs him. Matt Campbell needs him if they're going to get back in a race. I like them as an outsider for the playoff. This game most likely nailed their coffin. They will get a chance to play and beat Oklahoma twice if they get to the Big 12 championship game, which might move them up. One-loss teams do make the playoff, but they've got to run the table, and they'll have to beat Oklahoma twice. Penn State with a big win over the Ball State team that I just mentioned. Are they back? We'll find out more this weekend. Florida, South Florida's not very good, and Florida beat them 42-20, but they still don't look quite right. They're playing a 2-quarterback system. I just think they're going to put it together this weekend, and I think they're going to have a chance to upset Alabama, as we talked about a few minutes ago. Arkansas with a big upset over Texas. Texas is not as good as advertised. They're really struggling at the quarterback position. Steve Sarkisian, boy, it's always hard for me to say. Sarkisian will get this together, but it's not. This is a work in progress. Texas is still a little ways away, and they took a big drop this week too. Wisconsin with a nice win, coming back after a loss to Penn State at home. Virginia Tech 2-0 now after beating Carlos, who's not here tonight. His favorite long shot underdog team, Middle Tennessee. Ole Miss, as we talked about before, 54-17 over Austin Peay. Nothing to get excited about. BYU with a really nice win at home against Utah. Utah's kind of had their way with BYU the last several years. And this is a nice win for BYU. And they've moved into the rankings as well. Miami struggles with Appalachian State, but Appalachian State's well coached. You can see they're a step slow, but this is a well-coached team, and their special teams were really good. Arizona State, as Mark mentioned, under Herm Edwards with a nice 37-10 win. And North Carolina wins big over Georgia State, and Auburn 62-0 over Alabama State. The big movers in the coaches poll this week, on the good side, Oregon's up from 7 to 4. Iowa moves up 5 spots to number 7. I'm sorry, Oregon moved up 7 spots to number 4. They were at number 11, so they jump from 11 to 4, and Cincinnati doesn't move at all. I understand dominating performance against Ohio State. But Cincinnati gets no love. That's a good football team, guys. You're going to find out. They're going to play Notre Dame on the road. They're playing Indiana on the road this weekend. UCLA moves up 3. Virginia Tech up 6 to number 15. Ole Miss up 4 to 16. Auburn up 6 to 20. They're out of the top 25. Arizona State moves up 4 to 21. BYU moved up 8 spots from number 23. They were out of the top 25. And the really big mover of the week, Arkansas, 20 spots to the number 24 spot. They were 44th in the country last week. Arkansas played amazing. Watch out for this Arkansas team going forward. Texas, again, has its problems at quarterback and some other places, but Middle Tennessee's loss was the coach's fault. Oh, Carlos, I hope you comment when you see this. Oh, Rick, that's a good one. Let's see. Some of the drops, the big drops this week in the coaches poll. And I like to stick with the coaches poll, guys. There's 100 polls out there. I'm going to try to stick with the coaches poll all year just so that we stay consistent. Until we get to the playoff poll, maybe then we'll probably rely on that one, but that's a ways off. Notre Dame falls 3 spots to 10. Ohio State drops 8 from 3 to 11. Iowa State drops 4 to 14. USC drops right out of the top 25 from number 14. Texas out of the top 25 from 15. Miami drops out after a win. They drop out of the top 25. And can't read my last note here. Somebody that was 18 and dropped out. I'm going to say that was can't read my writing. Anyway, let's look at this week's games quickly. And we'll stay on. We might stay on. We're going to go on past 8 o'clock. This isn't going to be an hour show. Sometimes we'll go an hour and a half. Sometimes we'll go an hour and 15. You guys got topics you want to bring up? Bring them up. Rick, you want to talk about that Georgia game more? Give me a topic and we'll go through it. So let's look at this week's top 25 games. Then I'll look outside the top 25 and see what we got. We talked about Alabama playing at Florida. I think, Bryce Young's playing great, has had 2 great games out of the gate. He's probably put himself as one of the favorites for the Heisman already. Florida is not playing great defense. They can't settle on a quarterback. But I just got a feeling that Dan Mullen is finally going to get over the hump in the swamp. And I believe this game's at night. Game's at 3:30. Oh, great. CBS 3:30. No better time than, I got to go to a bake, though. Damn. Guess the phone's going to be on. At 3:30 in the afternoon on CBS, Alabama at Florida. I like Florida to upset this team this week. I think it's going to be a very interesting game. At noon, you got Nebraska at Oklahoma. At one time, this would have been a marquee game. But Nebraska's nowhere. I mean, they're at the point where they had a big win against Buffalo at home. The old days, Nebraska would have beat that Buffalo team by 70. And it's not that Buffalo's that bad. But Nebraska's really fallen on hard times. And Scott Frost, I think, is going to have a hard time surviving there. They just need a culture change. And I don't think Trev Alberts, the new AD, is going to really have the patience to wait Scott Frost out any longer. And Oklahoma needs to start rolling. They played better last week. Obviously, they won 76-0, but over a cupcake. And Shane Rattler, if he wants to be in the Heisman race, needs to continue to put up big numbers. You got Texas A&M will play New Mexico. They got to win that game. They got to win big. I think a very interesting game is, again, number 8 Cincinnati at Indiana. Indiana lost its first game to Iowa. Didn't play well. It was in Iowa. Iowa's got a really, really good football team. So let's not totally discount Indiana and in this game, because they played very, very well last year under Tom Allen, and they were an injury maybe away from being able to beat Ohio State and actually be in the playoff. That's how close they were last year. So whether they'll get back to that height this year, it's hard to say. It's hard to repeat that type of success at a school like Indiana. It really is. That doesn't mean they're not a good football coach, and their head coach is really, really good. Virginia Tech's going to get an interesting test. They played at home twice, won both games handily, really. They did, the score against North Carolina was close, but, they won pretty handily at home. It's a tough place to go and play, as we talked about at Blacksburg. But they're going to have a little test at West Virginia, I think, this week. Coastal Carolina plays at Buffalo this week. If you're up here in upstate New York, that might be a fun place to go watch a football game this weekend. Coastal Carolina has got a really good team. They've moved up to 16th in the country, and they're playing a Buffalo team that had a great run last year, and it's still not a bad football team right now. Michigan State visits Miami. Michigan State's won their first 2 games. Miami's 1-1 and struggled last week mightily, as I said, against Appalachian State. Michigan off to a pretty good start. Again, not great. Well, Washington was supposed to be good competition. But this is important. This is important for Michigan to get off to this 3-0 start that they'll be off to after beating Northern Illinois this week. And Jim Harbaugh's had to get things turned around quickly there, and I think he will. Or has, and I think he'll do well enough to continue as the coach of Michigan after this year, unless somebody brought that up on this show. Can't remember who it was. Jim Harbaugh to Dallas when they decided to fire Mike McCarthy. That'd be an interesting, and I can see it happening. Notre Dame gets Purdue at home. Again, Purdue's 2-0, but look at Notre Dame's got to take care of business. These are the guys they got to beat. Notre Dame's got tough games against Cincinnati. They've got a tough game against Indiana coming up this year. They always have Stanford. They've always got USC. Talked about Alabama. Iowa gets Kent State. So it's a bit of a breather if you want to look at it that way for Iowa, but they can't. Clemson's got Georgia Tech, and they got to win big. Can't fool around. They got to win by 40, 50 points every week now. Ohio State gets Tulsa. Oh, that's right. It was Stony Brook gets Oregon. Big goodbye. Tulsa gets Ohio State. Tulsa's 0-2, not playing well in that AAC. Arkansas with a game against Georgia Southern. They'll be going to 3-0. Georgia gets South Carolina. South Carolina's 2-0. We got to give them a puncher's chance, I guess. Their quarterback has played pretty well, thrown for 5 touchdowns in 2 games. So we'll see. But that game's at Georgia. Don't see South Carolina having nearly what it takes to get there. Army and UConn. Connecticut's a mess. And Army's a really good football team. This would have been in my best of the rest only because I'll always mention Army and Navy and Air Force. So I think, Jeff Monken is just a tremendous coach, and he'll have his team in a decent bowl game again this year. And it was Rick that mentioned, all right. And I thought it might have been you, Rick, mentioning Harbaugh to Dallas. And I don't know if you're kidding. Now I remember because I said, I don't know if you're kidding, but I think it's a distinct possibility. If Dallas flops, Harbaugh could look to jump. And I think he's the kind of guy that Jerry Jones jumps all over. Let's get back to this. Oregon, as I said, going to kill Stony Brook. Penn State, Auburn, very good game. Don't like Mark's prediction here. I think Penn State continues to win. It's a tough pace to play at Happy Valley. A little bit of an interesting game in the ACC this week. Virginia, who's playing very well under Brock Mendenhall, goes to North Carolina, who's been – again, they aren't firing on all cylinders yet, and this could be a dangerous game. North Carolina really good at home last year, and we'll see if that happens. I think Tulane and Ole Miss could be a 60 to 50 game. Ole Miss played better defense though, but Tulane, you saw against Oklahoma a couple of weeks ago, gave them all they could handle, and I think it'll be an interesting game against Ole Miss this week. Arizona State, BYU. I like BYU here. I know Mark probably likes Arizona State because he loves Herm Edwards. Not sold yet. I think this is a defining game for both of these teams, and I think they really victory is needed by both of them if they want to start that march up the polls. Iowa State will get a big rebound victory at UNLV, and then UCLA's got Fresno State. I love UCLA. I've talked about it here on the show since we started. I've talked about on my Sunday Stream of Consciousness show. I just love what Chip Kelly's done here. Last year, they were in every game. They didn't have a winning record, but they were in every game. But they got to be careful. This is a trap game. They got to be careful. They got Fresno State almost beat Oregon at home at Oregon a couple of weeks ago. So I think they got to be careful about what the performance they put on. I don't think Chip Kelly's going to let them let down. They had a bye week. I think they had a bye last week. Any other interesting games you guys like? UCF plays Louisville. I like UCF a lot. I talked with Mark a little bit. UCF will be going to the Big 12. Everybody talks about it. They think Cincinnati and BYU were the big pickups for the Big 12. But don't discount Florida because of now they'll be able to recruit in Florida more as a conference. But just the team itself, that team is on the come. I'm telling you, they have put a ton of money into that program, and they've had some really good success over the last several years as it is. And they're ready, I think, to really make a leap to the next level. And Gus Malzahn, I think, has found a perfect landing space place for him. I know Auburn fans will hate that, but Gus Malzahn's a good coach there. Maryland 2-0 against Illinois. Illinois really didn't play well again against Virginia last week. After an opening victory against Nebraska, things have kind of fallen apart for Brent Bielema and Illinois. Maryland's, again, a little bit better football team. They're being given credit for. So let's not forget about that game. What else do I have here? We talked about that game. Kentucky's got Chattanooga. Kentucky's a really good football team. This is a team, if I had an argument about a team that belongs in the top 25, and I'd have to drop somebody out, I guess maybe I'd drop Auburn out, to be honest with you. But Kentucky belongs to me in the top 25. They're a really good football team, well coached by Bob Stoops' brother. And I think this is another team. The SEC is full of teams that could, surprise people, but it's so. I mean, you've got. I was going to say that you've got a lot of parity, but you really don't. You've got Alabama, you've got Georgia, and you got Florida probably a little bit below them, and Texas A&M. You could say all four of them are together, but Alabama and Georgia are probably the cream of the crop. But you got all these teams bunched below them, or maybe you could put some of them up there with A&M and Florida. I mean, like Kentucky. I think Tennessee's better than advertised, even though they had a bad loss to Pittsburgh last week. Ole Miss, I could see having a good year. Mississippi State, who knows what Mike Leach is going to do there. Team is good, just good. I mean, the bottom is not good, obviously, in Vanderbilt, maybe Missouri. What else stands out to you guys? Albany U goes to Syracuse. Syracuse better be careful. I watched them play last week, and their offense was just horrendous. And it would be quite an embarrassment for Syracuse and quite a notch, feather in the cap for Albany, although they're not playing well. They're 0-2. Albany goes up there to Syracuse and beats Syracuse. You're going to see just how far Syracuse has fallen. I hope that's. I don't know. I guess I'd root for Albany to beat them. BC playing really good football, goes to Temple. UConn and Army, as Rick mentioned earlier. UConn's just a disaster. Randy Edsel had announced his retirement at the end of the season, and they said, no, you can leave now. They're 0-3, and they're probably not going to win a game this year, my guess. And Army's a really good team. The game's at Army. Gosh, what a great place to go. We talked about this last Wednesday. If you have not been to Army, and I know, I think, again, it might have been Rick that brought this up. I've been there. I want to go back again. My wife really wants to go. It's just quite a spectacle to go to West Point and watch a football game, to watch the cadets march into the stadium. And the setting is just wonderful for a college football game. Minnesota, Colorado might be an interesting game. Purdue, Notre Dame, we talked about. SMU at Louisiana Tech could be an interesting game. SMU, sneaky good in that AAU. I'm telling you, there's so many good teams in that league. An important game for two teams in the ACC. Wake Forest 2-0, hasn't played a really quality competition yet. Florida State almost beat Notre Dame a couple of weeks ago, and then they just had a horrendous meltdown last week. So it's kind of a big game for Florida State to get back on top, but Wake Forest is playing some pretty good football right now. Rutgers 2-0. They're going to get Delaware. They're going to win. I don't really see Appalachian State. We talked about they get a team called Eton College, which I didn't even know existed. So you can tell me what league they play in. You win a prize. Up to you, Rick. Idaho. We talked about USC. Big game for them. They got to win. They need to win at Washington. They really do. Arkansas should be 3-0. We talked about Northwestern and Duke. Could be an interesting game. Mississippi State and Memphis could be an interesting game out of the top 25. And I don't really see anything else that really lights my fire right now. If you guys got anything, you can bring it up right now. So lots of stuff going on this week, guys. Let me talk a little bit. I didn't get a chance to talk to Mark about the NIL, and we'll talk maybe about that next time. I want to talk a little bit more about the whole realignment thing and dive into it with my take as we wrap up the show tonight. And we can talk more. Rick, you talked about the. I don't want to short shrift you either. You were talking about the who we thought were going to be the USC targets. Right now, you're seeing all the usual names, right? I think it could. I think Bob Stoops is a guy they ought to really try to bring back, get him out of retirement, let this be his last hurrah. Bob Stoops is a great football coach. He's too good a coach to be retired so young in my mind, but we'll see what happens there. As far as the realignment goes, we saw the next shoe drop with, as we talked about with the Big 12 taking BYU from the independent status that they're at. BYU's wanted to get in the Big 12 for a long time. Now they found their way in. Cincinnati, UCF, Central Florida, and Houston. Houston's the weakest of those teams going into that conference. Does this put them back in that Power 5 stratosphere? Do those teams equal losing Oklahoma and Texas? Hard to say. From a TV ranking standpoint, no, and that's what's important. That's one of the most important things in all of this realignment. It's all about TV ratings and TV contracts. And, is it good for football? I don't think so. And the Big 12 will stated they may not be done. So they'll have 14 teams once Oklahoma State is gone. I'm sorry, Oklahoma and Texas are gone, and these 4 teams arrive. They'll have 14 teams. They could be looking to bring in 2 more at least to get to 16. I think that's where the SEC will be with Texas and Oklahoma. So, now you're going to see a little snowball effect because the AAC has got to replace 4 of their better teams. And they're going to go be looking at the Appalachian states. Who else could they be looking at? Maybe they try to bring Army into the league. I don't know. Who's Liberty. Liberty would be a good fit for the AAC, to be honest with you. I've been saying that a lot, to be honest with you. It's one of my phrases I hate to hear from people because that implies you're not always honest. Gosh, stop saying that, Keith. If I'm the AAC, those are some of the teams I'm going after. They might raid the Mountain West looking for Boise State or, Utah State or Arizona. I'm sorry, Air Force. Navy's already there. I mean, be very interesting, I think, for the AAC to put all the armed forces programs together. That'd be kind of interesting to me to rebuild the prestige of that league and put all of those teams together. Would be quite interesting because Navy's on a downslide now, but they're going to come back. Army's been really good for a couple of years now. Air Force has fairly consistently been a decent team over the years and sometimes a really good team. I mean, those are some of the teams I think the AAC is going to go after. Then those conferences have got to go somewhere to replace those teams, right? I mean, that's the domino effect. And what happens is, just like happened in 2012, you lost the Big East altogether. There was no more Big East. Now we did pick up the AAC, which didn't exist before then. And these are football leagues. You got to remember. I mean, there's teams in some of these conferences that don't even play football, but they play basketball. That's why Syracuse is in the AAC or ACC for football. They're stuck there. They're stuck there in the ACC playing basketball where they don't belong because of football. And they can't even compete in football in the ACC. Syracuse should have been in the All-American Conference. They'd be relevant there. But what's the end game, guys? I mean, I was all for this playoff expansion. I think it was an exciting announcement when they said they were going to go to 12, and I still think they should go to 16. But 12 teams is fine. I think there was going to be only 6 automatic bids, but they wouldn't necessarily go to the Power 5 conferences. It would be the 6 highest seeded conference winners. It wouldn't matter what league they were from. It could have been Boise State from the Mountain West. If they were number 4, they would get a automatic bid. But what happens is with these teams now, again, moving all over the place, and there's no regional sense to any of this. I mean, gosh, the Big 12's got teams from all the way from Oklahoma and Kansas to Florida to West Virginia to Cincinnati. They cover half the country. Yeah, but I don't want to get into where I'm watching a 12-team playoff and 4 of them are from the SEC, or 5 of them are from the SEC, and 4 of them are from the ACC, and 2 of them, one of them's Notre Dame, and one of them's a Pac-12 team, and I don't want to see that. Anthony Price, how are you, buddy? Good to see you. Sorry about your Washington Huskies. I believe you said you were a Washington State fan. Your Huskies are off to a bad start. Mickey Delaney didn't even make it tonight. I hope he's okay. Washington State gets a chance to play, I won't say giant slayer right now. I guess, historically speaking, USC would be a giant, but they're not a giant at the moment. Washington State gets their chance to knock USC off on Saturday night. That'd be interesting. What do you think about that Pac-12, Anthony? What do you think about realignment? Let me tell you something about the Pac-12. Pac-12 has had a lot of struggles the last few years. Washington's been good a few times. They've made a playoff at least once, I think twice under Peterson. But the Pac-12 has not had a regular entry into that playoff since it began. Oregon Duck fan. LOL, here, Washington football team. Oh, right. Washington football team. Well, congratulations then, Anthony. I should congratulate you. I shouldn't be berating you. Your team with a huge victory last week over the number 3 team in the country. Your team made a huge jump in the rankings. They jumped up 7 spots to number 4. Big win. Got a great coach. I mean, that your coach is so good. He's got a game plan, and he does not waver from what he wants to do, and that's pound the football. Does a great job. Let's go back to the Pac-12. The Pac-12, Oregon has been in the playoff. They lost to Ohio State in the championship game one year. Are they that good this year? I'm not sure. I still think UCLA is going to give them a run for their money. Sorry, Anthony. In the Pac-12 championship game. That's still my prediction. I don't see USC riding the ship. I don't think Stanford's got enough. David Shaw's a great, great coach. I don't think he's got enough. Herm Edwards is a great man and a good football coach. He's not a great football coach, and I don't think Arizona has got enough. Who else should we be talking about there? I mean, is there anybody else any good at all? Utah's got a good team, but they go to BYU and get beat. Looking in the South, I mean, I like UCLA in that South. I really do. And I don't think there's a team that's going to give them a run. I really don't. And in the North, I don't see Oregon getting challenged either. With Washington as bad as it is, I thought they were going to give them a challenge. But Washington's bad. They're not going to write. I mean, they haven't got a conference loss. I mean, they still could, theoretically win the conference, but that'd be bad for the Pac-12. The Pac-12 doesn't want Washington or Stanford, or Arizona State to win this league because they're not going to make the playoff. UCLA would have a tough time making the playoff. But if they run the table and go undefeated, they'll be hard to keep out, I think. So again, very interesting what's going to happen there. I really see Oregon and UCLA separating themselves from the pack there. That's just my thoughts. Guys, that's about all I got time for tonight. If you guys got any other topics you want to bring up, please do. If not, tell me what you think of the new theme music, by the way. I got a couple others I'm going to pay a little bit of money for it. It's got a nice college feel to it, doesn't it? Big games this weekend. Week 3. The weather will get cooler. Teams will get hotter. The season will get more fun. Anthony says going to come down to Oregon or Stanford on top. In the North, I don't see anybody up there challenging Oregon except Stanford, that's for sure. But again, as I said, Pac-12 doesn't want Stanford to win. I'm not saying things are fixed. Don't get, I say that. They're not rooting for them. They're going to root for Oregon. They're going to root for UCLA because UCLA runs the table. They'd be a big name and a new name in the playoff. Oregon's always a popular team. They'll get in the playoff if they win the Pac-12 and have no more than one loss. Guys, Keith Engel. Whoa. TGI Sports Talk College Football Huddle. We're going to catch you next week. Catch me Friday. Skip Hall, former Boise State coach with Don James at Washington back in the 70s and 80s. Some great football teams. And Skip's really a good guy. See you Sunday, Rick. Ed White in 2 weeks for you, Rick. You guys have a great Wednesday night. Keith Engel, I'm out of here.
This is a presentation of Northeast Streaming Sports.